Before we begin, if stories like this pull you into the hidden war between heaven and hell, subscribe to this channel, click the notification bell, and stay with me until the end. These stories go deeper than history. They go into the soul. And please, leave a comment below. Tell me how far these videos are reaching you, what part shook you the most, and where you're listening from. Your comments help me understand how far this message travels. Now, let me take you somewhere dark. There are saints who fought demons with shouting prayers, holy water, and public exorcisms. And then there are saints who fought demons inside silence, inside beauty, inside moments that felt like God, but weren't. Saint Catherine of Genoa was one of those. Her demons did not come screaming. They came whispering. They came during ecstasy. They came during prayer. They came disguised as holiness, humility, and spiritual brilliance. And the most dangerous thing about her temptations was this: she didn't always recognize them at first. Catherine was born in 1447 into wealth, nobility, and expectation. Genoa was a city of salt air, gold coins, and ambition. From childhood, she was surrounded by status, fine fabrics, polished manners, and the unspoken rule that her life belonged not to God, but to reputation. Yet, even as a young girl, Catherine felt something wrong with the world. She felt an ache that no comfort could soothe, a pressure in the chest, a heaviness that arrived at night when the candles went out. She would stare into darkness and feel watched, not by eyes, but by thoughts. Thoughts of greatness, thoughts of destiny, thoughts that whispered, "You are different." At 13, she asked to enter a convent. She was refused. The refusal planted the first seed. Years later, she would realize that demons rarely begin with evil. They begin with specialness. Catherine was married at 16 to Giuliano Adorno, a man known more for temper than virtue. He drank. He gambled. He humiliated her publicly. Their home echoed with arguments, slammed doors, and long nights where Catherine lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if this was punishment or accident. Despair crept in quietly. She tried to be a good wife. She tried to be obedient. She tried to be silent. But inside, something twisted. She began to hate herself. And demons love self-hatred. They fed it. You failed God. You are impure. Your suffering proves He abandoned you. These thoughts did not sound monstrous. They sounded logical, spiritual even. Catherine began withdrawing from prayer, from Massachusetts, from hope. She filled her days with distractions, fashion, social visits, laughter that rang hollow. On the outside, she was a noble woman. On the inside, she was collapsing. Then, one ordinary day in 1473, everything broke open. She entered a church, not to pray deeply, not seeking revelation, but simply out of habit. A priest began to hear her confession, and suddenly, without warning, Catherine felt something strike her soul. Not a comfort, not peace, but terror. She later described it as a sword of divine light cutting straight through her heart, exposing every lie she had ever told herself. She saw her sins not as actions, but as distance from God, and the distance felt infinite. She collapsed. Tears poured out of her without control. Her body shook. Her breath came in gasps. The world faded. And in that collapse, something else entered. Her first mystical ecstasy came not as sweetness, but as burning clarity. She felt God's presence so intensely that it felt unbearable. Love, yes, but love that exposed, stripped, and consumed. She would later say that even a moment of that love was more painful than hell, because it showed her how far she had fallen. This is where the demons changed tactics. They did not pull her away from God. They pushed her too close, too fast. As Catherine's mystical life deepened, strange things began to happen. During prayer, she would feel lifted beyond herself. Her body would go still, her face pale, her eyes unfocused. People said she looked like a statue. Inside these ecstasies, she felt flooded with divine truth. But not all voices were divine. A voice began to speak inside her contemplations. You are chosen. Few souls suffer like you. Your pain makes you purer than others. At first, she resisted, but the voice was patient. It quoted scripture. It echoed humility. It warned her against pride, while secretly feeding it. This is how demons operate in mystics. They do not say, worship yourself. They say, God trusts you more than others. Catherine began fasting severely, sleeping little, denying herself warmth. She wore simple clothes and avoided pleasure. Her body weakened. Her spirit burned hotter. People began to notice. They whispered about her holiness. They sought her counsel. They watched her during Mass as she trembled, sometimes weeping uncontrollably, sometimes frozen in silence. And every whisper fed the danger. The demon of pride does not roar. It applauds quietly. Inside her ecstasies, visions intensified. She saw light, fire, and what she believed were divine instructions. But alongside them came images of abandonment, visions where God turned his face away, where she was shown the emptiness of souls who failed him. Despair wrapped itself in righteousness. She began to believe that suffering was the only proof of love. That joy was suspicious. That rest was betrayal. The demon whispered, "If you stop, you will lose him." So she pushed further, harder, deeper. Her health collapsed. Her stomach burned constantly. She vomited after eating. Eventually, she could barely consume food at all. Doctors were baffled. Catherine said nothing. She believed her suffering was holy. And demons smiled. One night, during an especially violent ecstasy, Catherine felt herself falling, not upward into light, but downward into vast awareness. She sensed hell not as flames, but as endless separation. A presence spoke, not audibly, but unmistakably. This is what awaits souls who are not perfect. The fear nearly broke her. She woke screaming, soaked in sweat, shaking uncontrollably. For days after, despair clung to her like a second skin. She questioned her salvation, her sincerity, her worth. This was not God, but she did not yet know that. She believed holiness meant terror. She believed doubt meant failure. And demons thrive when saints misunderstand God. Yet even in this darkness, grace worked quietly. Catherine's humility saved her. Instead of trusting her visions completely, she submitted herself to confessors. She obeyed when they corrected her. She accepted rebuke. Slowly, painfully, she began to distinguish the difference between divine fire and infernal pressure. God's presence burned, but brought peace afterward. Demonic temptation burned, and left exhaustion, fear, and self-obsession. This realization would save her life, but not before the demons tried something worse. If they could not destroy her through pride, they would drown her in despair. After the ecstasies came silence. Not peace. Silence like a sealed tomb. For Catherine of Genoa, the absence of God hurt more than his burning presence ever had. Days passed where prayer felt empty, Mass felt distant, and her soul felt locked behind thick walls she could not break through. This is where despair enters. Demons rarely begin despair with screaming hopelessness. They begin with spiritual dryness, then quietly reinterpret it. A thought whispered inside her, "God has withdrawn because you displeased him." At first, Catherine rejected it. Then the thought returned, gentler, calmer, more convincing. "He gave you light once. Now he asks you to walk alone." She fasted more. She prayed longer. She punished her body harder. Nothing returned the fire, and the demon waited. Her physical condition worsened dramatically. Food repulsed her. Even water made her nauseous. Her body burned internally, as if a hidden furnace had been lit beneath her ribs. At night, she curled into herself, trembling, whispering prayers she could barely feel. Doctors came. They examined her. They shook their heads. Some said her illness was imaginary. Others blamed hysteria. A few whispered that it was possession. Catherine heard all of it. And inside her mind, another voice interpreted every word. "They see what you are. You are broken beyond repair. Even God is silent now." This was not a voice of rage. It was a voice of certainty. That is what made it deadly. During prayer, instead of light, Catherine saw images of abandonment. A soul reaching upward, unanswered. A door closing slowly. A flame extinguished. She began to believe she had exhausted God's mercy. This despair did not drive her away from faith. It chained her to it in terror. She prayed not out of love, but fear. She obeyed not out of joy, but panic. Demons adore obedient despair, because it looks holy from the outside. One night, the temptation sharpened. Catherine lay awake, her body weak, her stomach burning, her mind exhausted. As she stared into the dark, a thought rose clearly, calmly, fully formed. What if your visions were lies? What if they were never from God? Her chest tightened. The thought continued. What if you were chosen, not for holiness, but as an example of failure? She sat up, gasping. Her entire spiritual life suddenly felt fragile. Every ecstasy, every tear, every sacrifice, reframed as delusion. The demon did not accuse her of sin. It accused her of self-deception. And that accusation pierced deeper than guilt ever could. Catherine began doubting her own repentance. Were my tears real? Was my suffering sincere? Or just pride? The demon twisted even humility against her. If you truly loved God, you would feel him. If you do not feel him, it means he has withdrawn. This is despair's most dangerous lie, that God's absence means rejection. Catherine did not stop praying, but prayer felt like speaking into a void, and the void answered back. Her husband, Giuliano, noticed the change. He had lived years in dissipation, but Catherine's quiet suffering began softening him. He saw her illness, her patience, her silence. Something broke inside him. He repented. He abandoned his old life. He became gentle, but Catherine could not rejoice. The demon whispered, "Even now, you feel nothing. See, you are hollow." Her inability to feel joy became proof against her. As weeks turned into months, Catherine's body grew skeletal. Her skin grew pale, almost translucent. Her eyes seemed too large for her face, always searching, always listening. People who visited her spoke in hushed voices. Some felt peace in her presence. Others felt unease, as if standing near someone stretched thin between worlds. During Mass, Catherine sometimes froze completely. Her breath slowed. Her eyes stared forward. Inside these trances, she felt suspended, neither embraced nor rejected. This in-between state was hellish, and the demon pressed harder. One afternoon, during prayer, the voice returned with devastating clarity. "You are wasting your life." Not shouted, not cruel, simply stated. "Others serve God with joy. You serve him with misery. Which one honors him more?" The implication was lethal. Despair dressed as reason. For a moment, a single, terrifying moment, Catherine wondered if death would be easier than this silence. Not suicide, not rebellion, just rest. The demon did not encourage her to die. It encouraged her to stop hoping. This was the darkest point. The saints say that despair is the only sin that cannot be forgiven, not because God refuses, but because despair refuses God. Catherine stood on that edge. What saved her was not strength. It was obedience. Instead of trusting her inner voices, Catherine submitted everything to spiritual direction. She spoke honestly, painfully, without embellishment. She told her confessor about the silence, the fear, the sense of abandonment, the temptation to believe God had withdrawn forever. The confessor listened, then said something that shattered the demon's argument. God's love is not proven by feeling. Sometimes he hides himself to purify love. Those words did not bring comfort, but they brought clarity. For the first time, Catherine considered that silence might not be punishment. That dryness might not mean rejection. That despair might not be holy. That night, something changed. Not dramatically, not ecstatically, but subtly. The voice of despair still spoke, but it lost its certainty. Where it once declared truth, it now asked questions. What if God is not here? Instead of God is gone. That difference mattered. Soon after, Catherine experienced another ecstasy, but unlike the others, this one came quietly. No visions, no fire, only a deep, heavy awareness of God's closeness without sensation. She later wrote that God was never absent, only hidden behind her need to feel him. The demon had used her hunger for certainty against her, and it was not done yet. Because when despair fails, demons turn to false humility, spiritual exhaustion, and self-annihilation. When despair loosened its grip, Catherine expected relief. She did not receive it. Instead, something far more unsettling replaced it. Peace without comfort, closeness without sweetness, God without reassurance. Her soul entered what she would later describe as a living purgatory, not after death, but inside the body, inside time, inside breath. This was not punishment. This was purification, and it was terrifying. Catherine no longer felt abandoned. She felt seen. Every motive exposed, every hidden desire revealed, every trace of pride illuminated without accusation. The fire returned, but this time it did not come as ecstasy. It came as awareness, a constant, burning awareness of God's absolute holiness and her own incompleteness. She wrote later that if souls truly understood this fire, they would beg for it. yet fear it at the same time. Because this fire does not destroy sin violently. It dissolves identity. The demon adapted, no longer whispering despair, no longer tempting pride. Now it suggested annihilation. Disappear. Become nothing. Erase yourself completely. It sounded holy. It sounded humble. But it carried a hidden danger. The demon tried to convince her that her very existence was an obstacle to God. That perfection meant self-erasure. That love meant disappearance. Catherine felt herself thinning, not physically, but spiritually. Her personality faded. Her preferences dulled. Her voice softened until she barely recognized herself. People praised her humility. They said she was empty of self. They did not see the danger. During prayer, Catherine felt stripped even of language. She could no longer say, "I love you." Only, "You are." She could no longer ask, only remain. This frightened her. She feared she was dissolving into nothingness, not into God, but into absence. This fear was subtle, and therefore deadly. Her illness intensified. Her body seemed unable to coexist with the intensity of her inner life. She vomited frequently. Her stomach burned constantly. She slept little, yet she did not complain. Pain felt irrelevant. What mattered was the fire inside. She served tirelessly at the hospital of Pamatone, tending to the sick, the dying, the forgotten. She cleaned wounds, carried bodies, wiped filth without hesitation. Outwardly, she was charity itself. Inwardly, she felt emptied beyond recognition. And the demon whispered, "See, you are almost gone. Just a little more." One night, during deep prayer, Catherine felt herself standing before God, not in vision, but in reality more real than sight. There was no voice, no image, only truth. And in that truth, she realized something terrifying. She had begun to love the fire more than God. Not consciously, not intentionally, but subtly. She loved purification. She loved suffering. She loved being emptied, because it gave her control. And demons exploit control disguised as surrender. The realization crushed her. She wept, not dramatically, not loudly, but silently, like something breaking inward. For the first time, she understood that even spiritual suffering could become a form of pride. That wanting to be nothing could be another way of wanting to be perfect. That holiness itself could be hijacked. This awareness burned hotter than any previous fire. But this time, the fire did not accuse. It healed. Catherine surrendered something deeper than sin. She surrendered her image of holiness. She stopped measuring herself, stopped interpreting sensations, stopped analyzing dryness or fire. She simply remained, without expectation, without demand, without self-judgment. The demon lost ground, because demons require self-focus to survive. Her inner fire stabilized. It did not lessen, but it ceased to frighten. She described it as a constant flame that brought no pain, only motion, like being carried forward without resistance. She understood purgatory now, not as punishment, but as alignment. The soul adjusting to God's gravity. And adjustment hurts. This understanding gave birth to her famous reflections on purgatory, visions not of external flames, but of souls burning with longing, joy, and cleansing all at once. She knew this fire. She lived it, and she survived it. But the final test remained. Because demons do not retreat quietly. They wait for the body to weaken, for the mind to tire, for death to approach, and then they return with one last lie. As Catherine's body weakened, the fire inside her did not fade. It intensified, not violently, but steadily, like a tide rising without sound. Her illness worsened to the point where eating was nearly impossible. Her stomach rejected even small sips of liquid. Her body trembled constantly, thin as parchment stretched too far. Yet her face carried an unnatural calm. Those who visited her sensed it immediately. This was not resignation. It was readiness. And that is when the demon returned. The final temptation did not come as despair. It came as peace. A thought formed gently in her mind. You have done enough. It sounded merciful. You have suffered long enough. There is nothing left to give. This was not false, which is why it was dangerous. Because the lie hid in the conclusion. Now you may rest, without longing, without desire, without waiting. The demon tried to lull her into spiritual stillness before surrender, into closure without offering, into quiet without hope. Catherine sensed it immediately. This temptation did not disturb her. It emptied her desire. And desire, she knew, was the last bridge between the soul and God. She resisted, not with effort, not with prayer, but with a single inward movement. She leaned into longing. Not satisfaction, not completion, longing. In her final days, Catherine spoke very little. When she did, her words were simple, stripped of imagery, stripped of theology. She no longer spoke of visions. She spoke of alignment. She said the soul does not move toward God. It relaxes into Him. But relaxation does not mean passivity. It means consent. The demon's final strategy was subtle. You are already united. There is no need to wait. There is nothing more to surrender. But Catherine understood now. As long as there is breath, there is offering. Even the last breath. Her confessor and companions gathered around her bed. The room was quiet. No miracles. No visions. No ecstasies. Just breath slowing. Fire steady. She did not clutch a crucifix. She did not reach outward. Her hands lay open. She had nothing left to hold. In her final moments, Catherine experienced no fear, no assurance, no dramatic light, only a deep, weightless stillness. She later described this state, not as joy, not as peace, but as truth without resistance. The demon had nothing left to say, because lies cannot survive silence that consents. Catherine of Genoa died in 1510. Those present said her face did not change in death, as if she had already crossed long before her body followed. Her writings survived, not as visions of heaven or hell, but as maps of the interior fire. Her understanding of purgatory reshaped theology, not as punishment, but as love's final adjustment. She taught the church something demons desperately try to hide, that suffering does not purify because it hurts, but because it reveals. Her battle was not dramatic. It was internal. It was silent. It was psychological. And that is why it matters. Because most spiritual wars do not look like possession. They look like doubt, like dryness, like self-erasure disguised as humility, like peace offered too early. Saint Catherine of Genoa did not defeat demons by overpowering them. She outlasted them. She refused to interpret God. She refused to measure holiness. She refused to let suffering define love. And in that refusal, she became free.